All right, hey guys. Today I wanted to discuss a topic about creating constraints for objects in code. This is something that doesn't get a lot of attention. Usually everything in terms of layout is done in a storyboard. I don't prefer to use storyboards, and I will show you why in a second. But if you want to learn how to pragmatically create constraints for objects in code and build your, interfaces completely in code, this is kind of the video for you. There's really three ways to do it in code in iOS. There's something called layout anchors. There's NS layout constraints, which is part of NS layout constraint class. And there's another tool that Apple provides, which is a meta language that's a VFL or visual format language. Um, you can achieve the same with any of these, the same goal. I prefer the anchors. There is some downside to the anchors, and that is that if you're supporting a cloud, iOS that's earlier than iOS 9, you'll have to stick with NS layout constraint or VFL. Um, but for anything iOS 9 and above, I think personally that layout anchors are the easiest. So let's cover that one today, and then tomorrow or the next few days I'll cover the others. We'll start with layout anchors. So what layout anchors are is they are basically a relationship of a view to another view that you're in. So for example, if I'm creating a new view, it'd be a relationship to the parent view or the super view, or in relationship to, for example, another view that's on the screen. And then specifying, is there a constant? Do I want, like, for example, this blue and red view, there's an 8-point constant in between these. And do I want that 8-point constant, to be negative or positive? That's something that you'd add in. So if you want it to be, 8 points into the view or 8 points from the view, do you want it to be, on this left edge, the right edge, the top, bottom, center, etc. Um, so this is just Apple's website. This gives you kind of like a boilerplate idea of what you'd be looking at. Let's go through it in code right now. So I'll get an Xcode open, and I'll just start with a new project. Single view, I'll just call this constraints. Let's actually name this anchor constraints, so it's a little bit more descriptive. And we'll just use this view controller for now. And let me make this bigger. Okay. So there's a few different ways you can do this. I like to create, let's just create a view. We'll create like some sort of layout and design, and you'll see as I'm creating these objects, I guess, how they have relationship to each other in space. So we won't use the storyboard at all. So let's create a warning view. And this will be of a type of UI view. And we'll make this equal to this closure, and we'll execute in here, let view equal UI view. With its default initializer, we'll return the view. And this is very important with any time that we're doing any constraints, whether it's VFL, anchors, or NS layout constraints. You always have to specify something called translate auto resizing mask constraints to false. Otherwise, the auto layout engine will take over and your constraints will not render out in code. So let's set this view's background color to red. Okay. And now notice when I do this, I didn't specify a height or a width, right? Okay. Well, we do that in the constraints. So let's have a function in our viewdid load called setup views. This will be func view. I'm sorry. Setup views. Okay. And in here, this is where we want to start by doing what? Well, we have this view. We need to add it to our parent view. So let's add the warning view to parent. So we'll just I'll say self.view for you guys, so it's a little bit more straightforward. So you can see what I'm doing. Add subview, and this will be the warning view, right? So this will add this view to the subview. And then we're going to specify constraints on the warning view. Now notice I didn't say view, I said warning view, because these constraints are on the object that we're constraining to's parent. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll start by saying warning view, and There's several different relationship anchors I can use. There's something called a top anchor. There's a center X anchor, center Y anchor. That would be the center of this object, so the center of the warning views anchor. We'll use the center X anchor for this, and we'll say constraint equal to. And you get a lot of these. You get constraint, methods, constraint equal to, constraint less than or equal to, constraint greater than or equal to. You can use these however you want. Some come with a constant. You can add a constant in if you want, which will specify the distance. For this, let's use constraint equal to, and we'll specify it. I'll write this fully out again. Self.views center anchor. So what is this doing? Center X anchor. So this is essentially saying in relationship, going back to our relationship, set the warning views center position the same as the views, this parent view that it's in, self.views center X anchors position. So we'll say is active, this is something you always have to do, to true. And when we're making these constraints, we always have to worry about a height, a width, center position, an X and a Y position. These are always the values we have to specify in constraints. We can't just specify X and Y. Otherwise it won't render because it doesn't know how high or how wide it needs to be. You can't just specify width and height and no X and Y position because it doesn't have a point coordinate system to put that object. So we'll say warning view. Okay, let's do top anchor in this case. Okay, constant equal to self.view, dot top anchor. And we'll say is active equal to true. Okay, and now I'll just specify the width. Okay, with a width anchor, constant equal to self.view, same thing, dot width anchor is active equal to true. Now I need a height, right? So let's say warning view dot height. Okay, constant equal to, let me back up there. Dot constant. I can specify it to another views hierarchy, right? Object. So I can say, okay, self.views.height anchor, which would make it the entire height of the view. Or I can actually do it to a constant. I'm going to do it to a constant, which lets me specify a float value. So I'll say is active equal to true. Now let's run this. What does this do? Excuse me. Sorry, I'm a little still under the weather battling this cough. But anyways, what this will do is we should expect to see a warning view, which is a red view, right? Let me go back over here. Pinned to our super views, this view controller, right? This view controller has a view on it. It's top area that's the same width as the view controller view. So let's see what we get in just a second. Boom, there we go. Check that out. So I have this red bar that spans the top, right? If we go back to it and we look at these, this code here, we can see that it is the same width. It is 50 points from the top in terms of its height and its center position. Now, if I wanted to move this, for example, to the center Y position, I could do that as well. I could just say center Y here, and I could say center Y here. And I'll run that now, and now this will effectively put this in the center of the view. But it didn't. Oops, I apologize. The reason it did that is because we specified a top anchor here, so it's stretching it. So I'll put that back to the center X anchor. If I actually did want to do this, I would just, instead of specifying this top, right, because top is the center, I would say the X value, the Y value here, anchor, oops, and the center Y anchor here. So if I did that, that's going to center the view with the same width with a height of 50. Boom, like that. Okay, so let's put it back to the top. I'm going to make this 75 so it looks a little bit better. Okay. And let's position its top view with a constant. So I can add in something here called a constant, any of these, right? And I'll say, let's put it 20 points down. So that's going to move it below the status bar because the status bar will be right above it, you'll see. That way it gives us a little room at the top up here. So it basically just put it right below this status bar with this constant. Now, if I did -20 here, it'd put it above it, off screen, 20% off screen. We're not going to do that though. So let's add things to this view now and see what that hierarchical relationship looks like. So let's add a label. So we'll say let warning label equal UI label. Again, super convenient way to create UI objects. I'll just say let label equal this UI label. Return the label. Let's do a few things. Set the text to, we'll say warning no service. And then let's set the font, or let's set the text, sorry, the text color. Label.text color is equal to, I'll set it to white so we can see it on that white background. Remember, label, translate auto resizing masks to false. Very important. Okay, so great, but if I run this, this is not going to add it into the view because we haven't added it. Remember, we need to call this self.view.addSubView of our warning label now. So I'll do that down here. Oops, so also self view, add subview, warning label. And now we need to set the constraints on the label, right? So warning label, I'll say center x anchor constraint equal to self.center view.center x anchor is active to true. Say warning label center. We'll put it in the center of the actual screen. Let's do that, or the center of that red area. Constraint equal to self.view.center y is active. Okay, and I hope some of you guys can see what I'm doing because I'm making a huge mistake here, and I wanted to do this on purpose so that you guys would see this. What am I doing wrong? You can pause the video here for a second if you want to think about it. Well, the first thing I'm doing is I'm adding this warning label into my view, my parent view. Wait a minute. I want it in this red view. I don't want it in this view. Right now I'm adding it to that view. So let's change that. Let's change this warning label here to this so that I'm adding it actually into my warning label view. Remember, okay? What's the next thing I'm doing wrong? Next thing I'm doing wrong is I'm setting the constraints to the parent's view, which would be this view, and I'm setting the constraints not equal to this view. I'm setting them to this view. So again, we want the warning labels center X and center Y, right? So let's run this and let's see what we get. Now we should expect this to have this warning, no service, boom, in the center of our label. All right, sorry, our UI view. Awesome, that's great, right? That looks really great. It's centered. What if I wanted to add maybe an image over here? Okay, just maybe 5 points from this. Okay, that's not bad. Let's first start setting up the image. We'll say warning image, which is a UI image equal to this closure. Say let image equal UI image. Return our image. Let's set our image translate auto resizing mask. Pardon me. UI image view. Like that. Translate auto resizing mask to false. Okay. We need to assign an image to this image, right? And we'll say UI image with UI image with a name, which will be something I'll just call this alert image. Okay, great. Let's grab an alert. I actually have an image right here. We'll use this image. This little caution triangle thingy. So let's go to our assets. Let's drag over that image in our assets. Set it at 2x as well. I'm going to rename this from warning to what I just named it, alert. Back to our view controller. All right. So how do we get that image again into here, into this red view? Well, let's add it again into our parent view, which is, for the case and sake of this, we'll say this will be our warning image. Okay. And let's set some constraints on image. And we'll say warning image dot height anchor. Let's start with this. This is the easiest one. Constraint equal to some sort of float size. Let's set it to 25, 30. We'll say is active, right? We have to do this with all our constraints, otherwise they don't work. Let's set our width to our equal size of our height, which will be 30. We'll say is active, true. And now the tricky part. Okay, well, let's go back to this. We know we don't want it to be center X. We want it to be centered Y, so it's centered with the text in the same line. So that's easy, right? So center image dot center Y. Okay. Constraint equal to self dot what is it? Warning image dot center Y. Anchor is active equal to true. Now the next thing is we want it to be to the left of this W area, the beginning of this label, right? Well, this label has a right, a left, a top, and a bottom anchor. So that's pretty easy. We can set the warning image left anchor, right anchor, constraint equal to self warning image. This needs to be warning label, and that should be a warning label as well. Warning labels left anchor with an offset, which will be a constant, okay? And what is that constant? Well, if it's forward to the right, it's positive. If it's negative, it's going to be to the left. So let's set it off by 10, okay? And we'll say is active equal to true. Okay, let's run that and see what we get. For the sake of this video, I used self everywhere so you could see what I was referencing, what I was using, so it would make sense, but you don't need to use self. Boom, there it is. Not too bad, right? Everything looks centered, everything is nice. Now maybe, for the sake of this, we didn't want, we wanted this label and this image to be centered. Ooh, interesting, right? Well, they're not completely centered in this view because this one's offset by this one. Well, we could do that by adding another view into the background and then dropping both of those objects into that object. And then dropping that object into this red view. That can be accomplished that way. That's one way. But I hope this video makes sense. I wanted to give you a brief understanding and overview of how to use AutoLayout anchors, because anchors are super easy in my opinion. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. You can just drop them in the comments. All right.